Welcome to Beyond the Plinth, the show about biokinetics and everything health and wellness orientated. I'm your host, Steve Saunders, and today with me, as usual, I have from Biokinetics South Africa.
Hello, I'm Wendy Vermaak, and I have a very special guest with us today.
And who's that?
It's Dr. Takalani Muluvhu, one of our esteemed guests today.
Brilliant. So a doctor, hey?
Yep.
Highly qualified.
The big guns.
Okay. So what's the topic we're talking about today, Wens?
So this is something we get asked all the time, is where did biokinetics come from? How come it's only from here? So we're going to discuss the history of biokinetics, how we came to be, and there where we're trying to go, basically into the public health sector.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've got quite a bit to explore there. So Dr. T, lovely to have you here. Welcome to it. It's an honor and a privilege for us to be able to have you here on the show as well. Let's start with the big question. Who is Dr. T?
Okay, thank you so much, Steve, for the introduction. My name is Dr. Takalani Muluvhu from the Tshwane University of Technology, and as well still representing the Biokinetics Association of South Africa. So just to give a brief of a background, Takalani's come from the province of Limpopo,
okay,
where I studied at the University of Venda for a 4-year degree in biokinetics. And I developed the love for this profession because of one reason, just to advocate the issue of improving quality of life among the South African population.
Yes.
So by background, I studied there for 4 years, as I said, and as well I proceeded to private practice for 7 years. Then in 2011, I decided to go back into academics, where I started at the University of Venda again, where I started. I became the head of the program, and I worked there for 4 years. And from there, I joined TUT in 2016, continued to be the head of the program. And I hold a PhD in human movement science, where my research is more in health and wellness.
Okay.
So in brief, that's Takalani Muluvhu.
So you don't like to sit still? You don't like to just sit on your laurels? You want to advance all the time? Obviously, you've got a very inquisitive mind to go on top of it. Anyone who goes into academics, I've always said I got my degree, and that's where it stopped. Dead. It stopped at that point. So going into academics and exploring topics and taking research to that sort of nth degree, figuring out where the limits of knowledge are in each of those respective fields is an absolutely amazing thing. It'll be interesting to hear a little bit about your pursuits within your PhD and where they're going to be taking you in the future. But let's go back into a bit of the history of biokinetics. So you've got quite an in-depth knowledge on that history, where biokinetics came from and how it developed up to what we're dealing with today. And then we're going to discuss where that's going to and the pursuits in the future.
Well, I think first and foremost, let's just introduce that this isn't a new profession. Everyone thinks we're sort of only just crawling out of the woodwork, but actually this is our 40th year.
Whoa.
So it's big celebrations, yeah. We've been around.
40 years.
Yeah.
I was 8 when you started.
We won't discuss
No, we're not going to discuss
that.
it. You heard that one, hey?
Yeah.
Asking the lady what her age is, and she wouldn't give it, so you ask for the weight. So she tells 32.
Yeah, so we're in our naughty 40s ultimately. So, but it's actually even from before then, right from the 30s when it actually all started.
So give us an understanding of the philosophy behind biokinetics and how it started. It is a uniquely South African profession right now, developing worldwide, and you have this experience that's clinical, it's a preventative, it's engaging with the individual out there in the market. So whether it's going to be preventative, whether it's going to be rehabilitation, you can deal with almost any sphere of engagement with the individual out there. But where did this all come from? How did it develop into the organization, the profession, the service-oriented business that it is?
Okay, thank you so much again for that question. Just to elaborate more in terms of where does biokinetics come from, or where is the history of biokinetics, and what actually stimulated the need for us to have biokinetics in South Africa. This has been a profession that developed, as we said, Wendy said, is 40 years now. It has been there, but the thing is the name that was used before, way back in the 40s, was using physical education, which is still, today there is BS in physical education in different spheres. But as time goes on within the military, there was a lot of injuries and all those kind of things that actually give birth for us to start with a new profession that will actually address these issues that were taking place then. And during the World War II, when I go through the history as well, it stimulated the beginning of getting something rehabilitative to deal with all the soldiers that were wounded during the particular war. But as time goes on, that thing becomes a little bit quiet for some time. And in 1966, somewhere in the University of Potchefstroom, by then, which is currently Northwest University, they develop another young man. I'll call him a young man by then. His name is Professor Gert Lucas Strydom, who decided to study his PhD degree in physical education, but focusing on a very interesting topic by then, just to look at the benefits of regular exercise on cardiovascular health and its therapeutic effect by then. That was through his PhD, and he worked together with some medical doctors, and then they saw a need for the inclusion of biokinetics in South Africa as a therapeutic modality, but they were using exercise as an effect for people who suffered from myocardial infarction. But just to use a layman's term, people who suffered heart attack and the like.
Yes.
So he started to implement the intervention in that area, and then it was successful. But there was a lot of resistance by then, where people said people will die like flies if you put them on exercise while they just experience or suffered from heart attacks and the likes. But he got a support from different medical doctors to continue with the study, and there was very great outcomes in terms of the benefits of exercise. But it didn't stop there. The other person who also started way in the 1970s also wanted to mimic the same study among diabetic patients. And they saw, wow, this thing is working. So let's come with a name for this therapeutic modality. And by then they call it kinesiotherapy, which simply means that is the therapy through movement, which is this particular thing called exercise. And that stimulated those good academias to say, you know what, we have get actually a medication, which is exercise, is medicine to deal with all this chronic disease, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and the likes. And they started to mobilize together with other universities. I can just mention few, which is the Potchefstroom University by then, University of Pretoria, the Stellenbosch University, and as well the
Free State.
Yeah, the Free State as well, and University of Port Elizabeth, which is now currently called Nelson Mandela University.
Yes.
So they come together as a team to come with this new name called kinesiotherapy. But they got a lot of resistance from other professions like your occupational therapy and physiotherapy as well, to say you are actually going to take over in terms of our therapeutic model. It's like there was a gray area between these three professions.
Yes.
But they continue, however, they didn't stop. They continue to actually source what name can we come across in terms of biokinetics in South Africa, because we want the public to benefit out of this. So somewhere in 1982, they came with a name, and they say it's going to be called Biokinetics, which simply means that it's life through movement. And that was actually agreed by everyone from all these people. And that's when the new profession or the new discipline called biokinetics was actually born in this country, because it's uniquely a South African thing. And that's when on the 9th of September in 1983, it was now gazetted under the South African Medical Council and Dental Council by then, which is now called the Health Profession Council of South Africa. And that was through the leadership of your Professor Gert Strydom that I've mentioned, and other of his colleagues. So I can say that is the history of biokinetics. And you find that it started with only few people that were part of this profession to be trained on. And that is actually the brief history of biokinetics.
Just the brief version, yes.
Very interesting brief version. You've crossed over all sorts of topics and genres and activities, and they're all uniquely South African. So 1982, 1983, that's where this all really formalized and established itself as biokinetics. And fascinating to see it develop over such a period, jostling and elbowing for position in the market, and the unique offering of what biokinetics is. And still in the market, you still got to work hard to keep that awareness of what exercise and movement can do as a prescriptive measure. It's a big thing, and I still see it in the market where it's tablets before movement in a lot of environments. And it's
especially
fascinating.
actually in your mental health space.
Yeah.
That's one of the key areas that I think people are starting to realize is instead of all the, as you say, the tablets or the pills, the underutilization of exercise as a modality for mental health, cardiovascular health, diabetes treatment and prevention, and so on.
Yeah, just to also add on what Wendy just explained to us, it's quite important for this profession of biokinetics to actually be considered, more especially if we're looking at the term public health care, which we wanted to elaborate it more. What do we mean about that? I think that will be our next question.
Yes, absolutely. At least be straight into that. So what is the pursuit of biokinetics as a profession, and where does that fit in that public health space?
Okay, just to go through that, in South Africa, as I said, that was a brief history. So biokinetics actually, it was portrayed more that it will only work for the elite, let me put it that way, more especially in the private sector. And that's where many biokineticists today, they are more working in the private sector. However, they missed a link to understand that where this degree actually started, the vision started from military, where we are dealing with all the soldiers that were wounded.
Yes.
But biokinetics has been there in the public sector for many years, because it started in your second military hospitals, one military hospital, which is happening today, which is a great modality in terms of treatment among these special people called the military people.
Yes.
But however, we're missing a link that let us not only focus on one aspect in the country. What about the general population? So that's where I'm coming to the issue of saying the public healthcare system, where I'm saying it needs to be taken into all these existing hospitals that we have in the country, so that everyone can actually get the service of a biokineticist.
Yes.
So that we can be able to advocate that exercise will be a great tool to actually be a preventative measure for all the people that are suffering from your non-communicable disease, like for instance, hypertension, diabetes, your cardiovascular disease, obesity, and all the different
non-communicable
and more
diseases.
especially non-communicable disease. Not forgetting that, yes, biokinetics does the work in orthopedic rehabilitation. However, we want to focus on this called non-communicable disease, where we can be able to save a lot of money for this country, more especially for the Department of Health, if we focus on dealing with the well-being of an individual. Before you prescribe a pill or medication,
Yes.
give them exercise and see if we can see an improvement, because prevention is better than cure. So that's where we are coming in as biokinetics.
So I was about to ask a question now. The idea of prevention before a treatment as such, this is where you're stepping in, but that really is about education.
Yes.
It's education of the general public and education within the public system
Sure.
Yeah.
to be able to understand how important exercise is
Yes.
to the prevention of any of those health and lifestyle type diseases that are affecting so many people.
There are some initiatives in terms of that education that's going on. Some people might know about Western Cape on Wellness, or it's known as WOW.
Yeah.
Wow.
WOW. And that is specifically an initiative by the Western Cape government with sort of separate partners to educate champions of the government there to be better exercisers and physically active people, to therefore then educate everyone else in their department and then further on into the actual public. So there are initiatives and drives going on, and it is all actually biokinetics, physical activity and movement based.
Yeah.
So the recognition is there, but as you say, education from a broad scale is very necessary. With COVID, it's been quite difficult, obviously, in keeping people at bay. But with the use of social media and these types of initiatives, even the South African National Defence Force, they've had a 6-month program that's been going on now with biokineticists in Potch. So they're bringing us into these initiatives to start doing that kind of education, running specific programs and so on.
So I'm going to bring you back in the private sector. We have a lot of wellness type programs, and they engage and use the leverage point that is the biokinetics segment quite effectively.
Yeah.
I almost put that out as a question, okay? Because the question is that the model that the public sector should be looking at using in terms of that engagement, or is it too limited within that environment, and should we be looking more broad scoped? So if I were to take any one of those, without naming any names, any one of those wellness programs, how much engagement occurs for the member of that wellness program through the biokineticist, and how much long-term and education-based is their process or engagement process? How many processes can I put in there?
So I think it also depends. There's various programs. Some are specifically focused on weight loss. Some are specifically focused on screening.
Yeah.
Some are more performance-based in terms of cardiovascular health. So it depends on the program that you're looking at. Any or all of those programs could be a blueprint. But actually, those blueprints actually come from all the research and academia that's been going on for the last 40 years.
Yes.
So that's how they've actually come up with those corporate space wellness programs, is based on all the public and private sector data already created.
So it's actually just closing on itself.
Yeah, so it's all the same thing. So whether you're treating a patient preventatively for whatever specific condition, or whether it's rehabilitative, I beg your pardon, or
use your big words.
Yeah, or preventative or treatment based, it all still comes back to treatment modalities that are scientifically evidence based practice already.
Yeah, just to also add in terms of that one, because as we were saying that they are more in the private sector. So if you take them into the public healthcare system, like for instance, in the previous year, which was in 2021, I was brought in as the Director of Public Sector to form part of the obesity review strategy within the National Department of Health. But the most important thing was, yes, we were a population that is obese. So obesity will come with other different chronic disease like hypertension and the like. So what do we do if we find people who are coming to the hospital obese? So it means that we're not only going to focus only on weight loss. We're going to also focus on the outcomes of that particular condition that they have. So we started a strategy last year, which we worked on it. It's now on the final stages as NDOH, which simply means that in all these tertiary hospitals or either academic hospitals, we're going to form something called metabolic clinics, where a biokineticist and a dietitian, they will work together.
Yes.
And the main goal is in terms of prevention, to make sure that we improve the quality of life of society. So that's why I'm saying that this exercise modality that will be done by the biokineticist will surely play a major role in this country in terms of improving the quality of life of our society.
So there's already big steps being taken in the public health environment that you're engaging with now.
Yes.
Okay, and it's taking us forward. So where does this all lead to? Where's the end goal, the ideal city, biokinetics, public life engagement for you? What's your vision going forward?
Okay, just to take you a little bit through the summary of the vision. When I started as a biokineticist or a biokinetic student way back in 2003, I'm from a rural area. Yeah. So biokinetics was something that was unknown. Yes. And here I am from a rural area coming into a new profession that is unknown within our black community as well. And when I was being trained in that area, I started to develop. I said, wow, there is a treatment that we can use rather than our people going to the clinic to always go and fetch medication and all those kind of things. What can we do? And I started doing that for 4 years. I came to Johannesburg and I was trained again in my internship. And that love continued to develop. And that was my vision, to say, I want to see biokinetics in the public sector. But what will be the driving force to that? Because sometimes government might resist for this new profession to come into being. So I started that work from private practice, go into academics, and my focus area shifted immensely to say, let me do my master's degree, focusing on looking at physical activity and some selected health risk factors among employees in the rural area that was within the municipality employees. I got good results, and that stimulated me to say, can I continue and do a PhD level as well and start to build up on the vision that I have for the inclusion of biokinetics in the public sector. Then I did my PhD focusing again on physical activity and some selected metabolic risk factors among the same type of employees. And when I look at the results after analysis, I found that close to 11% of that population showed a high level of obesity, showed a high level of hypertension, showed a high level of total cholesterol, which contribute to non-communicable disease. And I said, this is a way forward for me to say, I want to see this thing in the public sector so that I can educate the community. And out of that, because I was the head of the program at the University of Venda, I approached the district Department of Health where I come from. Well, I was still there to say, I want to bring to you students that will work in the primary health care in the rural area that are clinics. And we want to implement exercise to all the people, more especially the elderly. It worked immensely, and we saw the results. And we continue engaging with government to say, you've got something here which is golden that can save the South African population out of non-communicable disease pandemic. Yes. And let's use exercise, use biokineticists that are involved. So in short, the vision is to actually see biokineticists placed in all the hospitals in the country, whether it's in the urban area, whether it's in the semi-urban, whether it's in the township, whether it's in the rural areas within these primary healthcare facilities. And we use exercise. And out of that, we will surely, as I said earlier on, we will save government for always buying medication for people with hypertension, people with diabetes. Before they go to that area, let's use exercise first and see if there will be an effect or benefit. So that is the vision. Nothing else, but the vision is to see all the bios playing an important role in this piece of a cake that we want to be in. So that is the vision where we are going.
And within the economics of the healthcare system, it makes a huge amount of sense because massive exercise has such a low cost financially and such a huge benefit health-wise. So it makes sense.
Quality of life, for those patients as well. So, obviously we're talking about money being bottom line.
Yes.
But bottom line actually is the health and wellness and quality of life of our population.
True.
Wow. Okay. So the engagement within your environments has been positive so far. The engagement with government has led to the rollout of these programs, and the programs are starting to become entrenched in certain areas. If we can start to see this happening and the general population who, to be honest, my understanding of it is the system works on the basis of you have a problem, you go to a clinic, the clinic writes a script and they give you some tablets in a plastic bag and you walk away.
Yeah.
That's literally what I see our public health care system doing currently. That's how I understand it.
Yeah.
I'm relatively privileged to have my own medical aid and I can go to a private hospital. They still do the same thing. I go to a hospital and the first thing I want to do is give me some tablets. Every time I leave hospital from having had an accident or something like that, what's the first thing they give me? Is a whole lot of tablets.
You need to be relooking at your lifestyle.
Yes, sure.
So when you do too much sport and you're not talented enough, you tend to end up on your head a few times. But the issue is really around the mindset of the medical profession. I say that just because those were my engagements, but how few of those engagements actually brought me through to the philosophy you're discussing now. Very few of them brought me there. I understand it and I'm passionate about it and I think exercise is amazing. Even personally, my mom as an example is she's just been through a whole lot of healthcare at a hospital and they're trying to figure out what's wrong. and exercise was never a consideration. It's always the cardiologist, the psychologist, they're looking for anything that they can pinpoint as an absolute one-off, this is the problem, as opposed to the lifestyle could possibly have been the problem. We don't know. Obesity being an issue.
Yeah.
And the issue of, it's such a political hot potato calling or labeling anybody as obese.
Yeah, sure. That's true.
And that's another thing that makes it difficult because
it's a clinical term, and yet it's become this shame.
Yeah.
You know,
it is, and it shouldn't be a shame.
No.
It's just an acknowledgement. It's an acknowledgement so we know how to interact. And it is something that when you speak to the doctors and they go, well, maybe you need to lose a little bit of weight, as opposed to saying you're obese. We need to change this. How are we going to change it? We could do exercise, or here's a whole lot of tablets. What is the intervention that's going to be there? So it'll be phenomenal if we can get it right on a macro scale in South Africa within the healthcare system. By the sounds of it, Dr. T, you're on your way to doing it.
Yeah, sure. Because as you explain in there, the other thing that I think it's more like lacking in society today. Yes, you go to the doctor will tell you about medication that they are prescribing to you that use, but they will say exercise. But the problem, they don't tell you how to do it. And that's where we come in now to say, this is how you need to do exercise. So I want to see one day in this country where you see many people, they are just going to a pharmacy. You see, when you go to a pharmacy, they give you medication that 3 times a day, take that after me. So yes. I want to see exercise being mimicked, like packaged in one tablet format where you say there's a FIT principle, frequency, intensity, time, and type. You say frequency, I will exercise 3 to 5 times a day. Intensity, moderate, either to vigorous. What type of exercise? Cardiovascular type of exercise. Which one? Jogging, cycling, and the likes. So those are the things that we want to see packaged in that way, that someone can go over the counter and get it. But he or she will get that information from a qualified biokineticist.
Yes.
And that person will tell you how to do it. And at the end of the day, what would be the benefit? 1 or 2, it will be to improve your cardiovascular fitness. Number 2, to help you manage the cardiometabolic risk. Number 3, help you to actually improve your psychological well-being. So already a person will say, wow, I've got something that I can use because this is for free. It's just for me to move.
Yes.
But now there's a biokineticist behind that is actually driving this to going forward. So that is the main role and as well as a vision.
Brilliant. So Wendy, I'm super excited after listening to this because it does give me hope. Looking at the environment, the general health and the public health environment, our general population, and the opportunities to improving health outcomes is through exercise, really. Yeah. And that's what biokineticists do.
Sure.
So I've got to say a big thank you to Dr. T, Wendy.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, that was brilliant. And I think I've got about 8 different topics I've written down as we're going through this thing. I think I'd like to explore some of these topics in the future as well and look at some of your research that's been done there, how it's going, and maybe a little bit of a follow-up, if we could, with you, Dr. T, in the future around the public space engagement. It'll be brilliant to keep an eye on that.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Brilliant. There we go. So that wraps it up from us. Thanks very much for joining us. As always, if you've got any questions, queries, comments, anything like that, leave it in the comments below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We'll see you on the next episode. This podcast was produced by Johan Turon and the team at Soundpatch Studio, presented by yours truly, Steve Saunders. Interested in doing a podcast? Drop us a message on soundpatch@me.com. That's soundpatch@me.com. As always, thanks for listening and catch you on the next podcast. Welcome to Beyond the Plinth, the show about biokinetics and everything health and wellness orientated. I'm your host, Steve Saunders, and today with me, as usual, I have from Biokinetics South Africa.
Hello, I'm Wendy Vermaak, and I have a very special guest with us today.
And who's that?
It's Dr. T, Dr. Takalani Muluvhu, one of our esteemed guests today.
Brilliant. So a doctor, hey?
Yep.
Highly qualified.